Welcome, everybody, to today's webinar with the Center for Agricultural Profitability at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. My name is Ryan Evans. I'm the communication specialist with the center, and again, want to thank you for joining us today to discuss a very important topic that has a lot of implications for business owners, including farmers and ranchers, coming up in the next year. Going back to 2021 is when Congress enacted the Corporate Transparency Act. And under that act, virtually all U.S. corporations and limited liability companies will be required to file basic information regarding the officers and major owners of the business. The filings will be used to develop a beneficial ownership registry to be used in the fight against money laundering and similar criminal activities. Today's webinar will introduce the Corporate Transparency Act, explain why it was adopted, and identify some information that's required to be filed, as well as who in the business must be included in the filings. And those filings will be required next year in 2024, and there are no exemptions for small, agricultural, rural, family-owned, or similar business entities. To present today and tell us all about it, we are very pleased to have with us again Dave Aiken, a professor and extension agricultural law and water law specialist here at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. And I want to remind you, if you have any questions as we go, we will be happy to address those with Dave here after his presentation. So please enter those into the Q&A panel or in the chat box in Zoom, which I'll enable shortly here. So thanks again for joining us. And Dave, I'll share your slides here and turn it over to you.
Okay, Ryan, thank you very much. This is an interesting topic. And it sort of seems like it has come out of left field, but we will make our way through it and see if we can make some sense of it. Okay, next slide, Ryan. Okay, yesterday I got found this in one of the ag newsletters that I subscribe to, and this is from the Western Farmer Stockman, and it's based on a news item from Montana State University, and it's new corporate law could impact farmers, and it's the Corporate Transparency Act, and when this was brought to my attention by one of our outstate educators, and I started trying to figure out what it would do, I was going to say, oh man, people are going to hate this. So I was, afraid that some people might think that, you must be making this up. This can't be for real. So hopefully Montana State is credible enough that that you'll be willing to take our collective word for it in extension, and we'll so it's not just something that somebody pulled out of the air to have some fun. Okay, next slide, Brian. The United States is one of the few industrialized countries that does not have a national registry or database on who are the owners and or major people in corporations and limited liability companies. Excuse me. Most industrialized countries do have this. We do not. But the purpose of these things is to make it easier for law enforcement to find out who is, kind of hiding in the shadows of a corporation that may be suspected of money laundering or some other type of criminal activity or even white collar crime. And, because we don't have this in the United States, it's very easy to use U.S. corporations as part of a scheme for money laundering or something like that. And so Congress passed this law back in 2021 with the idea being that we can do a better job of dealing with this and working with our global law enforcement partners, to try to deal with organized crime, drug cartels, this type of thing in their various criminal enterprises. The bottom line is that most corporations in Nebraska will need to file with the Corporate Transparency Act registry in calendar year 2024, even though they are completely non-criminal, don't have any, organized crime hidden in their corporation or anything like that. So next slide, Ryan. Okay, where does money laundering come from? And it's, we basically the next few slides are going to try to give us a little background on money laundering. And I'm not retired from the FBI or the Treasury Department. I am not a white collar crime expert or anything like that. I'm an ag law, water law person. So, I'm doing the best I can, but I'm not an expert on this. So don't ask me how to set up a money laundering scheme. Okay. Al Capone, famous prohibition criminal, back in the day, bought up commercial laundries, and we have dry cleaners today. Back then, they had laundries, and he would take money from his various criminal enterprises, including illegal liquor sales, but also gambling, prostitution, protection, whatever kind of criminal racket that he might have been involved in, and just added that to his real income from the laundry businesses. So then this, criminal money would be mixed in with the proceeds from the laundry business, and it'd all be claimed as laundry business revenue. And they would, he would pay the taxes on it. And then once the taxes have been paid and so forth, and that money was, he felt that money would be clean enough that he could just go ahead and do whatever he wanted to with it, and supported a rather lavish lifestyle and all this kind of stuff. There must have been a hitch in there somewhere, because the IRS finally got him for tax evasion, and that's how he ended up in jail. But that is the pattern, and it's called money laundering because of these, the physical laundries that Al Capone bought. Not that he ran the money, the actual paper money, through a spin cycle to clean it up or anything, but it was just, this is where it allegedly where the term came from. And now it's money laundering is a global phenomenon. Drug gangs and other criminal enterprises use money laundering as a way to try to clean up their money, so that they can go ahead and spend it, and hopefully they're good enough at covering their tracks, they hope, so that law enforcement won't be able to trace the money back to them and their criminal enterprises. Okay, Ryan. Now, there are two major tools that are used in the fight against money laundering. The first one is doing away with national bank secrecy laws. And that's, you hear about these offshore bank accounts. Those are countries where they have bank secrecy laws, and so that they won't give law enforcement or anybody else information about any of the customers in the banks. So the United States passed ended bank secrecy in 1970, and again, most, not all, but most industrialized countries no longer have bank secrecy laws. But that's the first one. The second one is the ability to create these dummy corporations. Excuse me. And the offshore accounts are where there are none of these bank secrecy laws, and you can see the names. Some of them actually are islands and stuff like that, but they don't have to. They're just called offshore accounts because that's where a lot of them are located, uh, and so that's but that's just kind of become a phrase now that any place where they have these where they have these bank secrecy laws, and maybe there are also these tax havens or corporate tax havens where you can earn your money in a corporation that's set up in one of these offshore jurisdictions and pay very low in taxes or maybe even no taxes. Then you can put them in the bank accounts and send the money all over the world. Maybe run it through a bunch of different of these offshore banks, to keep it complicated for law enforcement trying to track these this criminal enterprise money down. And dummy corporations are also a part of this system. Dummy corporations are corporations that look perfectly legal on paper, and they are not necessarily illegal. It's just if they are used for illegal purposes, then it's criminal. But and there are some legitimate uses that we'll talk about in just a little bit. But anyway, these dummy corporations, everything looks fine on paper, but there may not be any actual business assets or anything like that associated with the corporation. But the dummy corporations are there for for the criminal gang to run their money through, to make it look like it's proceeds from a legitimate business, and then with their offshore bank accounts and stuff like that, they transfer it from country to country, from bank to bank, from corporation to corporation and stuff, to make it really, really hard for law enforcement to figure out where this money came from, and to trace it back to the original illegal origin. And as we'll see, dummy corporations are pretty easy to set up in the United States, because we don't keep track of who is actually in the corporation. Okay, Ryan. Okay, so how does this all work? Well, like I said, I'm not an expert in financial crimes. That's before this project, all I knew about it was what I saw on TV cop shows. So not very much. But these dummy corporations, they will work very hard, and it's not that hard to do, to keep the criminal names out of the corporate paperwork. That is not hard to do. There are ways to do that, and they have all these offshore bank accounts and move the money around a lot. And I'm sure that law enforcement officials who work in this area, who work in these financial crimes area, they see money run through the same corporations, through the same offshore banks, and they know that it's probably dirty money, but they can't get through the paperwork in order to find out who is the actual criminal that's behind this. And I remember my wife and I like to watch British cop shows, and I remember one that we saw not too long ago where the junior detective was trying to run somebody down who owns property in England, and they go through all the different corporations that are in the chain of title for the of ownership of the property, and then they hit an offshore corporation, and with no beneficial owner registry. And he said, and then we ran into a brick wall. And now, having done all this work on beneficial ownership and stuff like that, this junior detective could have said, gosh, I wish we had a beneficial ownership registry for the Bahamas or wherever this offshore thing was, so that we could nail these guys. I'm not a dialogue writer, but I hope you get the point. Okay, next slide. Now, we're one of the last to do this, And but as it turns out, it's fairly easy to set up these dummy corporations in the United States because there's very little information that has to be filed about the owners. In fact, in Nebraska, and this is state law, so every state, may be a little bit different, but they follow kind of the same pattern. Basically, when you file the initial papers with the Secretary of State, you don't have to have any of the owners or the potential owners because you can't issue stock yet. Can't issue stock until you're approved by the state. But you have, the lawyer who's setting up the corporation and someone who is acting as an incorporator, and that's really all you need on the paperwork to get your corporation approved. And then when you file an update a year later, you have to list your board of directors, but you don't have to list any stockholders. And so, the directors may be stockholders. In fact, in a lot of, family type businesses and stuff, they will be stockholders. But for these dummy corporations, they may have a small board of directors that are all, one's an accountant, one's tax preparer, maybe, and one is, one is the attorney or something like that, and they're the board of directors. And so you don't really know who is in the business beside who is on the board of directors. So without a beneficial ownership registry, it is very simple and widespread to do. Any state, you can set up a dummy corporation and it would work well for a criminal enterprise if that was what they wanted to make out of it. Now, dummy corporations are not criminal normally. They're used quite a bit in real estate. They're used quite a bit in business acquisitions. Where your one corporation is buying the business assets of another corporation. They may want to have a place to park those assets until they're ready to actually bring them in to the into the business of the acquiring corporation. And so you could use a dummy corporation for that. But they can also, because of their flexibility, they're also easy for criminals to use if they want to get involved in the money laundering business. Okay, next. Okay, the 2021 Corporate Transparency Act will require everybody that is engaged in, that has a corporation or a limited partnership or maybe some other limited liability business entities, they have to, and as a part of this registry, they're going to have to provide some very basic information about, who the major officers are, who's actually running the business, and who, who some of the major shareholders are. And we'll go through that in more detail in upcoming slides. And so this way, if the Treasury Department or somebody thinks that some corporation may be used as a front for financial crimes, they can go to the Corporate Transparency Act registry or database and find out, get more information about who are the major players in that corporation and see if that gives them any lead on terms of determining whether this is a viable lead in their criminal investigation or whether they need to look someplace else. And for example, is a Nebraska corporation that's buying agricultural land in reality a front for hostile foreign interests, maybe from Iran or China or Russia, without the Corporate Transparency Act, there's really no way to find out. You could try to go to court and do it that way, but that would, that takes a lot of time, and law enforcement typically, doing that is something that is kind of a last resort for them and the sort of thing that they really don't want to do. Okay, next slide. Okay, now For existing corporations and limited liability companies, reports will be are required beginning January 1st, 2024. And you have the entire year of 2024 to get the information filed with the Treasury Department. And the deadline is January 1st, 2025. If new corporations or LLCs are established for the first time in 2024, then they have 90 days from when they are approved in Nebraska by the Nebraska Secretary of State. And if, then they have the 90 days to file the report. There are a lot of exceptions, but there's no exceptions, for ag, for family businesses, for small businesses, the sort of exemptions that ag or smaller businesses often find in state law or federal law. They do not exist here. And we'll go through some of the exemptions here real quickly. There is one possible exemption. Large businesses with at least 20 full-time employees and at least $5 million in annual revenue. That may fit for some ag businesses, and I don't know why that is an exemption. One of the 23 exempt corporations, but it is, and so that's it. A lot of the exemptions, as we'll see, I think, on the next slide, is that they've already provided the same beneficial ownership information to federal regulatory agencies like the Security Exchange Commission, the Commodity Futures Trading Commission, or the Federal Deposit of Insurance, that type of thing. Okay, next slide. Okay, so what entities are affected? And this talk is really limited to Nebraska. It's basically the same sort of thing is going to apply to everybody, but I'm just talking about Nebraska. So, but Nebraska corporations, and Nebraska limited liability companies for sure. The Corporate Transparency Act itself talks about entities that are created by approval by somebody like the state Secretary of State. And in Nebraska, that's probably limited partnerships and probably limited liability partnerships. I didn't take the time to run through all the statutes to figure that out, but that's something. If you're in that situation, check with your lawyer, and they will let you know whether you need to file with the Corporate Transparency Act or not. And then one legal analysis, Nebraska legal analysis that I came across that was very helpful, said that some trusts were probably subject to filing requirements, but not all of them. And I'm not an expert estate planner, and they didn't really get into any details, so I don't know. That's another question for the lawyer. Your personal attorney can help you figure out if you need to file, and if you have, say, you're involved in more than one business, that's they can help you sort through all that, and help you do that if you need that assistance. Okay, next one. Okay, what entities are exempt? Basically, those that are not created by filing with and being approved by the Nebraska Secretary of State. Easy ones would be sole proprietorships and general partnerships, and then some types of trusts. But as I mentioned before, we have this long list of exemptions, and half of them I don't even know what they are. You see them on the list, but I said, what's that? I don't really know. But again, there's no ag exemption, there's no family exemption, there's no small business exemption. And this one, my favorite, there's no subchapter S exemption. I remember years ago when we were talking about Initiative 300, the Nebraska Corporate Farming Law, farmers would tell me that, well, yeah, I'm a corporation, but I don't have to meet the family farm requirements because I'm a subchapter S corporation and we're exempt. And that's not how it works. Subchapter S corporations are corporations. They're just corporations that can have some tax options that C corporations do not have. But that's but there's apparently a belief out there that subchapter S corporations really aren't corporations. And so that's not that is not true. It's not truth for the Corporate Transparency Act. Okay, next slide. Okay, so most what I would call mom and pop corporations or family corporations, whether they're farm or ranch or non-ag, they are going to be subject to this, and because a lot of the big corporations have already been, if they're traded on the stock exchange, then the Securities and Exchange Commission already has that information and stuff like that. So here's the list. After we have finished with this, Ryan will post the slides. So if you want to look at these to see if there's any of these that you can fit your business into, exemptions that you can find, you can take a look. The Treasury Department educational information that I will refer to later also has all this information. They have descriptions about of what these different 23 things are. And so that's the one. And the one possibility, as I mentioned before, is the what is they called the large operating company. But again, the 5 million in gross income and at least 20 full-time employees. That may have some feedlots or other types of ag businesses that could qualify in that. So that's we'll see how that's something for you and your lawyer to figure out. Okay, next slide. Okay, so all the people, all the business entities that have to be registered, and this is a little bit repetitive, but have to file this information with the Treasury Department. And under the law and the regulations, they are called reporting companies. And it doesn't matter whether they're corporations or limited liability companies or trusts or limited partnerships or LLPs. They're all collectively referred to as reporting companies. So that's what if you're a business that has to report under this law, then you are a reporting company. Okay. Next slide. There, thank you. Now, what information has to be filed? Okay, well, the reporting companies have to register the, quote, beneficial owners of the company. And you would think that beneficial owners means the people who actually own the company, and that would be pretty much correct, but it's not all of it. But there are two categories of people associated with the company that are covered in the category of beneficial owners. The first one is any individual who directly or indirectly exercises substantial control, and we'll come to what that is in just a second, over the operations of the reporting company, or any individual who directly or indirectly owns at least or controls at least 25%. So if you're Al Capone and you're not on the board, but you've got one of the guys that works for you is on the board, and he's holding the stock, but he's really holding the stock for you. Under the law, it's not Al Capone's henchman, who has to be registered. Al Capone has to be registered. And we'll get into that in just a little bit. Of course, they'll lie probably, but that's another story. Okay, next slide. Now, substantial control. This gets a little bit complicated, but anybody in the company who exercises substantial control has to be registered. And that doesn't matter how much stock they own, doesn't matter if they own any stock or not. they have to be, if they exercise substantial control, then they are, then they have to be registered with the Treasury Department. Okay, and it's there's 4 criteria. Oops, left some numbers out. But if they're a so-called senior officer, and we'll talk about that on the next slide, if they have the authority to appoint or remove officers or a majority of company directors. And sometimes, like in partnership agreements, you'll see stuff like this written into the partnership agreement saying that whoever one of the partners has this authority, that they can, they can do this kind of stuff. So also be in LLCs. That might even, it could also be in smaller or closed corporations. So I mean, this stuff is kind of textbook corporate law kind of stuff. Okay, the individual is an important decision maker, or the individual has any other form of substantial control. So that's the catch-all one. And so to have substantial control, you do not have to be a owner. And ownerships are different for we're shareholders for corporations, but you have ownership interests for limited liability companies, limited partnerships, and so forth. That's you don't have shares of stock typically for those entities. Okay, go ahead, Ryan. Okay, so who are these senior officers? Okay, president, chief financial officer, and big companies have all of these typically. General counsel, lawyer, in-house lawyer, chief executive officer, chief operating officer, or anybody, regardless of title, or even if they don't have a title, who performs similar functions. So, if I run a cafe in town and I'm the cook and chief bottle washer, and my tax advisor said, you can save some money on your employee benefit plan if you do it through a corporation, something like that. I wouldn't have any of these I wouldn't have any of these formal titles, but I would be doing all this stuff, and so, that's the title isn't important. It's what the person does in the business that determines whether they are considered to be a senior officer, whether they have a title or not. So that's the one. Then the next one is the important decision maker. And this is not necessarily day-to-day types of decisions, but more strategic decisions that are made. And again, these are the changing the nature or the scope of the business. Say that you're starting out in a family farm, and you grow corn and soybeans, and you decide to go into swine, to feed, as a, feed the corn to, or something like that. That would be a change in the nature of the business. You've gone from a crop operation to a crop and a livestock operation. Or say you've got, say you decide you're in a livestock operation, you decide that you're going to go for climate friendly beef, or organic beef, or something like that. Change the scope of change the scope of the business. That's that sort of thing. That's the business operation example. Finances, loans, can authorize the sale of the assets, has to approve the operating budget, and this, we're talking about effective control. We're especially in outside of corporations, like in a partnership or an LLC, where you have more informal operating procedures. there may be somebody who basically says, yeah, this is what we're going to do or not within the business. And, so they're the important decision maker. Then the last one is somebody who can authorize the change of the structure of the business, reorganize it, dissolve the business, merge, change the operating documents, the articles of incorporation or the partnership agreement or whatever it might be. Those are all examples of important decisions that can be made by the important decision maker. And these sorts of things, some of them are things that are, the sorts of things that if a corporation is going to do it, it has to go to the shareholders for approval before it can be done. The board can recommend it, but the shareholders have to approve it at a shareholder meeting. And, so these, so that's, some more of this traditional business law types of stuff. And these decision makers need not be beneficial owners. They typically are. They may be the major stockholder, or they may have gone through an estate plan where a lot of the stock is shared out with the kids or whoever the heirs are. But dad maybe is the one who still kind of calls the shots and who sets the direction for the business. Dad may only have a 15 or 20% share, but if he's the one that people still defer to and stuff like that in terms of the direction for the business, he's an important decision maker, even if he's not a 25% shareholder. So, okay.
Dave, I know we said we'd save questions to the end. I did want to sneak this one in because it's relevant, just for some clarification from a couple people asked, if a day-to-day manager for an LLC is considered to have substantial control for purposes of this.
Okay. I think the distinction is between, if they're day-to-day, then they would be up here in the senior officer. They would be like the chief operating officer, even though they do not have that title. They may not have the strategic dimension, which is one step up from the day-to-day operations of the business. So they would not necessarily be an important decision maker, but they could be considered a senior officer if they effectively are in charge of running the business, on a day-to-day basis. And, people are going to be interested in trying to split hairs so that they don't have to comply with this. But this is where your advisors can help you kind of think through that and think of somebody who needs to be in or not. But if they are in charge of the day-to-day operations, then I would say they would fall into the senior officer category, even though they are not, may not have one of these 5 titles or however many there are titles up there.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Okay. Now there are some specific exemptions into the beneficial ownership exempt group, and children, minor children would be one. Somebody, number 2 is kind of a broad category. Nominee, intermediary, custodian, or agent. That's basically somebody who is acting for somebody else. And again, that's the Al Capone example, where Al Capone doesn't want his name on any of the paperwork. So one of the guys in his gang, Al says, "You're going to be my guy in this corporation." And so that guy is going to be the one who maybe owns the shares or who sits on the board or whatever. But they are basically, the passing along what Al Capone wants to the rest of the business. And so that would be, so this one is something that I suspect you're going to want to think very carefully about, because I don't know this, but I've got a hunch that this is the kind of thing that the Treasury Department might scrutinize. Now, if you got something where somebody is, like a trustee for minor children or for the grandkids, maybe something like that. The grandkids are shareholders, but they're still in diapers, that kind of thing. That's not going to be a problem, or shouldn't necessarily be a problem, I would think. But if it's not that type of situation, then that's maybe something that the Treasury Department is going to want to take a look at. Okay, the third one, and this is going to be troublesome because there's going to be there's a wide range in terms of whether you're really, whether you are, quote, just an employee, or you are, an employee who's a manager, who has important day-to-day responsibilities, then you're a senior officer. And they don't, at least the stuff that I've seen from the Treasury Department, which is not their detailed regulations, which are very, very long and involved, and your attorney will have to go through those, so he or she will be able to advise you better on this than I could. But in a lot of family businesses, it's very common for family members to be shareholders, to be directors, and to be employees of the company. That's a very, very common situation. So the fact that you're an employee, that does not kick you out. That does not exempt you. If you are only an employee and you're not anything else, then you'd be exempt. And I'll call them minor employees. If you're a minor employee and you're not a shareholder, and you're you don't exert control and stuff like that, and you're not then employees are exempt. But I think if it's going to be hard to sort out. Some employees might be required to be registered anyway. Other employees may not. And so, again, the attorneys that have to grind through all 150 pages of fine print to figure that out will be able to give you better advice on that. Okay, and then inheritors. That's something a word I'd never encountered before. Didn't encounter it in law school, and I took a wills class. But anyway, that's somebody who does not own stock, but when, say, a parent dies or a grandparent dies, then they will inherit stock. They are not beneficial owners because they have no current ownership interest in the company. When they inherit the stock, then they could become a beneficial owner. But before that, they are not. They're exempt. Then the last one is creditor. If the only relationship you have with the company is that they owe you money, then that does not make you a beneficial owner. Now, there are circumstances in which, say, the lender, if the company goes broke, the lender may take over the business. I would suspect that when they take over the management of the business, all of a sudden they're senior officials. But again, that's I'm just throwing that out as an issue. I'm not saying that that's how it is, and that's if that's relevant to you, then you need to have a visit with your lawyer about that. Okay, next slide. Okay, here's the nitty-gritty stuff. Here's the stuff, the information that has to be filed for the company that is a reporting company. The company's full and complete legal name, any informal name like a trade name or a doing business as name, the complete address of their, where their main business is or where their business headquarters is, the entity like the state where the business was established legally. For example, if you're a Nebraska corporation and your paperwork was filed with the Nebraska Secretary of State, so forth, then Nebraska would be that state. And then your IRS tax identification number, including if you have more, and the employee identification number. So you may have one or two numbers that are filed with that. But that's all the information that is required for the company. Next slide. Thank you. Now, for each beneficial owner in the company, and all the companies are going to have, somebody's in charge of the business and in charge of running the business, and so there's always going to be at least one. Here's the information for them: full legal name, date of birth, their complete current address where they live, and then picture ID, including the unique identification number on that ID, the issuing jurisdiction like the state of Nebraska, and the actual image of on the picture ID. And so that would be passport, driver's license, or the state ID card. And you don't have to submit your social security number or anything like that for the individuals. And so no financial information about the company or the business is required. Although, presumably they have ways of getting that if they want to, but I don't know. Okay, next one. Okay, then this is something that's optional. If you're involved, say maybe in more than one company, or if the family has two or three or four corporations or LLCs or something like that are interconnected as the family business, you can get identification numbers from the Treasury Department so that you don't have to enter the same information each time. You don't have to enter it in time after time after time. You can get that for the company, and you can get that for the beneficial owners, again with quotation marks around that, so that you don't have to. It's optional. It's not required, and that is. But that may be a time-saving option that's there. Now, FinCEN. This is the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, which was part of the Treasury Department. They are the ones that are in charge of the Corporate Transparency Act, but they are the ones, the financial crimes folks within the Treasury Department, and they are, they're the ones that have all the educational information about the Corporate Transparency Act reporting and stuff like that. Okay, next. Okay, how do I report? It's an online reporting system, and what I would recommend is that none of the information is currently available. I mean, there's a form that will be available, but probably not before January 1st, I would guess. And if it were me, I'd print it out, I'd download it and print it out, then fill in the blanks. I mean, fill it in so that if I'm going to do it myself, I can go online and I have it all filled out, so I don't have to spend 3 hours online. And if you're like me, you might get bounced out of the off the website or something like that, and unless they have a save option, you may not be able to come back. You may have to re-enter everything again. So I would have it all in a paper and pencil form, and then when you've got all the information that you need to completely fill out the form, then do it at that time. When you've got it all ready to go, there may be an option where they have a PDF form, and that it may have those fields that you can fill in the form, something like that, and then upload it all at the end. I don't know how they're going to do it, but so we'll just kind of have to wait and see how they're going to do it. But it's going to be online, so you're not mailing anything in. You will be doing it through an online form. And if you have, flaky internet service, you may need to go to the lawyer's office or the accountant's office or something like that and have them, and they may have a better connection. So, who knows? Okay. When the information is available, it will be available on the FinCEN beneficial ownership webpage, and I'll give you the address for that in just a second. And one of the questions they have on their frequently asked questions is, can I turn it? Can I do it now? And they say, no, we won't accept. You can't do it until January 1st. And they don't tell you where to go to submit the information. So that's, you have to wait until they do it, and it probably won't be until January 1st or right before January 1st, so that people don't try to do it early and then have to do it again. Okay, penalties. There's $500 a day, but again, you have until January 1st, 2024 through January 1st, 2025. So you've got a year and a day basically to get the information submitted. So, don't forget about it, but it's not that it all has to be in there on January 1st. January 1st, 2024 is not the deadline. It's the first day that the information could be submitted. Okay. Okay, there's penalties. Now, do I have to use an attorney or CPA to file? I would, FinCEN says no, and their answer is on the screen. But if you're going to do it yourself, or maybe even if you're going to go to the lawyer, if you're really concerned about this, I would download the small entity guide. And this is on their webpage. And it's 57 pages long, but it's a lot of yes, no types of things. And you can work through that if you want to. Otherwise, you can, make the appointment with your attorney and say, we need to do this. When can, so you're our attorney, you've set up the business, so let me know what information you need from me in order to have the information and fill this out. But I'd like you to take care of it. Now, FinCEN says, no, you don't have to use an attorney or a CPA. They expect that many reporting companies will be able to do it themselves on their own or using the guidance that FinCEN has used, like this small entity guide. And if it's something that you're not comfortable doing on your own, or you're just confused by the small entity guide or something like that, then you'll need to work with somebody to help you get it in. Now, for sure, FinCEN doesn't say anything about limited liability partnerships or limited partnerships. So if that's part of your situation, then you'll need to work with your attorney on that. Okay, next one. Okay, who can access it? It's going to be limited to law enforcement and national security and intelligence. So that's, there's not final regulations on this stuff yet, but it is a law enforcement tool, and so that's how it will be set up. Now, next one, Ryan. Okay. I understand that the vast majority of Nebraska companies that will have to file with the Corporate Transparency Act registry are completely legal. They're not fronts for organized crime. I understand that. The Treasury Department understands that. They're looking for the needle in the haystack, but they have to have the haystack before they can look for the needle in the haystack. And all this filing, where 99.99% of the people who file will have no criminal connection whatsoever, they have to have that so that they can find the 1 in 1,000 or 1 in 10,000 that are criminal. Will this be the end of money laundering? No, but hopefully it will give law enforcement the tools to get more of them, get more of the bad guys, and do it that way. And the way I read the Treasury Department information, it looks like it could be used if a district attorney or county attorney in Nebraska wanted to find out if a Nebraska corporation or some other corporation registered in another state, to find out who their shareholders were or their beneficial owners were, that they would be able to get that information through this registry. So we'll see how that works. Last slide. Okay, here's the homepage, and again, the slides will be available as PDFs so that you can download those. And if I were going to try to do this myself, I would do everything. I would look at the small entity compliance guide for sure. You'll have to spend a lot of time with that. They also have a lot of the same information in frequently asked questions that is on their webpage. But that's very informative. It gives you some more details that may not be in the compliance guide. A short introductory video. I don't know how helpful that might be. I haven't looked at it. But then you can also sign up for updates. So if you want to know when can you start submitting it, and what's the form that you use to submit the information, and how do you go through that, you'll sign up for the update information, and you can do that. Okay, if you have questions about doing this, your attorney should be able to help you out. Okay, thanks very much. And now we'll turn it over to questions.
Thank you, Dave. We do have a number of questions here. We'll try to get to. I know we're short on time, but if you've got the time, Dave, we'll work to answer.
Yes, that's fine.
Okay, we'll work to answer as many of these as we can here. A couple of them I think you did cover. Notably here at the end, you talked about who will be using or have access to the registry. There's a question at the beginning, is if the registry will be public record at all levels.
No, you will have to be law enforcement. Again, they haven't set up the regulations, but some of them in Europe are public records, and there are groups that want them all to be groups in Europe that want them all to be public records, but it will not be open to the public in the United States. I mean, I think it's going to be like the IRS. Some people can get copies of my tax returns if they show the IRS that they have a need for them for law enforcement or whatever, but that doesn't mean my neighbors can look it up. It's not like that. It won't be like that. I'm confident of that.
A question perhaps related to privacy, and maybe if you have a thought on this, question asks, what are we giving up if we are an employee required to be listed? How might that affect us personally?
I can't imagine that would affect you at all. Some people are afraid of, the big state and stuff like that. But aside from those types of concerns, I can't imagine any reason to do it. And some attorneys may be advising and said, well, if we think they might be covered by a senior official or beneficial owner, but we're not sure, we'll err on the side of being inclusive. That's better than leaving them out and then having them come after us later and say, oh, you should have included these guys and now you got to pay all these fines. So, but we'll see how it goes.
Great. And a question, if for some clarification, do trusts fall under this law?
Apparently some do. The attorney, yes, the attorney who wrote the article in the Nebraska Lawyer magazine said that some trusts will be required to file, but that was all they said. They didn't give a legal, they didn't give a legal citation that I could run down or anything. So it was just, that was there, and they know a lot more about it than I do. So if they say some will and some won't, that's good. That's it. But I can't help you who's in and who's out.
Here's another question. How about someone who is a consultant, such as an ag professor or a CPA, who strongly advises the owner of a business, for example, not to go into a new line of business? Are they somebody who arguably substantially influences decisions? This question asks.
They have said that people who are paid consultants typically are not considered beneficial owners. If that's their only connection to the business, that they come in and they give a professional opinion and then they leave, that's that's like a CPA, an outside CPA or an outside attorney who is not general counsel for the business, that kind of thing. That they are not considered. They would not be required to file generally. But if you're concerned, ask or look at some of the educational materials, and because they go into a fair amount of detail on some of these points.
We do have a comment going back to trusts here, Dave. Somebody just chimed in and said that trusts are included if the trust or its parties own or control a reporting company.
I would suspect that's correct.
Perfect. And then a couple of questions about the ID or driver's license requirements here. One person asked if they will need to submit a copy of the passport or driver's license with the registration. I believe that an image is required, right?
Yes.
And another question related to that: how would you handle it if elderly persons no longer have valid ID?
They can get in Nebraska, they can get a identification card pretty easily. You may have to get them to where the pictures are taken or something, assuming that they are reasonably ambulatory or can get them around. But I would try the state ID.
Okay. This question, I believe, came in when you got to the FinCEN, the first slides about FinCEN, asking if this information has already been provided to a bank for CD deposits. Are we done, or do we still need to comply?
If you have CD deposits, banks are among the exemptions because they submit what they have to submit to the regulatory agencies. If I don't understand how a CD is a business, a reporting company. I mean, if your business has CDs, that's not really relevant to having to file anything. It's if you're set up as a corporation or an LLC for sure, or maybe a limited liability company, limited liability partnership or a limited partnership, you're going to have to file no matter what. But
great. Here's one: if the LLC sets up a remainder interest in real estate for children after the death of the parents, are the parents who own no LLC units required to file?
Well, the parents are, if the parents are transferring something to the kids, they would have to file, I would think. But if the stuff is not coming from the kids, if the LLC interests are not coming from the parents, well, apparently there's two parents. Makes sense. One may be the current owner or current owner of the LLC, and the other one is not. It's just the one that's in the LLC that would probably have to file if they are, meet the other requirements.
Okay, great. Thank you. Question here about cooperatives. If you got any sense of cooperatives in as part of this act, and it says, I am part of a cooperative and that no one owns more than 10% of the stock.
Yeah, that's, but somebody's running the business, right? Somebody's running the business. Somebody's in charge of the business's finances. I mean, those are all senior officials that are going to have to file. You don't, you've got to have, if you've got a business, somebody is going to be is going to have to file or, have their information filed as individuals. You don't have to have shareholders file. I mean, if nobody's a 25% shareholder, then the ownership of shares, nobody files. But you've got, the people who are running the business, who are maybe making major decisions, whether they're shareholders or not, they're the ones that have to be reported.
Okay, great. Well, seeing as we are over time, you did a great job answering a number of questions in a short amount of time there, Dave. We want to thank everybody for attending today. And you can find a recording of this webinar. We'll post the slides as well. Look in the chat box. I wrote the web address for the location of that at cap.unl.edu/webinars. It will be in the archive section there here in a couple of hours, I suspect. As you close out of your Zoom window today, you'll be presented with a very short survey that if you could complete that, it really helps give us some feedback, including any ideas you have for future webinars. And I think that is it. That's all we have. So Dave, thank you very much. And thanks again to everybody for attending today.
Good. Thank you. Thank you, Ryan.
All right. Have a great Thursday afternoon, everyone.